Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, dear ministers, CEOs, leaders of the international organizations, representatives of the civil society, thank you very much for your leadership and joining to this important summit. Once again, we are almost now 3 hours. I thank all of you, but especially some of the colleagues, such as I mentioned Secretary Nalia from Mexico. She was with us at 5 a.m. with her time, and the Minister Tasrif of Indonesia, who stayed until 11 p.m. At night with us. So thank you very much. And of course, all of you here. During these 3 parallel high-level sessions, we had very good discussions with the ministers, business leaders, and investors. Now, I would like to have the rest of the some 20 minutes of our meeting finishing by, first of all, listening from the chairs of this panel, high-level panels, the discussions there. And then we are fortunate that Secretary Bouriet, United States Department of Energy Secretary Bouriet is with us. We would like to hear Mr. Bouriet's views in terms of the US perspective. We will finish with Secretary Bouriet, and then I will have some concluding remarks. Unfortunately, Vice President Timmermans, despite all the technical efforts we had here and in Brussels, we were not able to solve the technical problem, and we will perhaps look for another opportunity. Now, of these 3 high-level panels, the first one was innovation, which was chaired by the Norwegian minister, Minister Bru, together with the Chile minister, also here, Jobé, they chaired together. Perhaps I can now give the floor to Madam Minister to tell us what was the discussion, Madam, on the innovation, a very critical part of our energy discussions, energy debate globally. Very much looking forward to hear from you, Madam Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guru. Oh, I have an echo. Let me try. Okay, panel 1 on accelerating clean energy technology innovation was very excellent. We had a wide-ranging discussion. I am very grateful to all of the speakers for their very thoughtful and valuable contribution. There was universal support for the timely and important special report from the IEA on this topic. We have heard very interesting insights into national plans and progress in clean energy technology innovation and important perspectives from industry. There was a broad agreement that the level of effort towards critical clean energy technologies be raised globally, both from the public and from the private sector. We have heard some very good examples of international cooperation, which will continue to be key to tackling some of the major challenges important technology areas like aviation, shipping, and of course, heavy. One aspect that came across very strongly was the vital role of government, not funding, but also for creating the right incentives for private innovation and investment. Market incentives for energy efficiency equipment, or CCS, batteries, bioenergy, and renewable technologies are important, promoting the most efficient. The IEA has been a leader in making a global call for sustainable recovery post-COVID-19. With the launch of the ET special report last week, we can also thank the IEA for placing energy innovation firmly on the agenda for policy. So I encourage the IEA to convene experts and undertake the analysis that can help accelerate the path from lab to market. I think that something that we can all agree on is that technological progress is essential. We are to put the peak in global emissions behind us once and for all. So again, thank you so much for being part of this very interesting.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. You are right. Innovation is critical to address our energy and climate goals. If I may, two remarks here. There is a growing interest to address our climate and energy goals, but the government research and development budgets for clean energy remains stable in the last 10 years, according to our Energy Technology Perspectives report last week. So this is, if we are really, all of us, eager to foster the innovation, R&D budgets for clean energy needs to grow, which is stable in the last 10 years. The second point, I had the opportunity to listen some of the comments, and I agree with you, Madam Minister, very good discussions. The International Institutions Group, IIGC, Mrs. Pfeiffer, made an excellent point in terms of the role of technologies reaching our targets. I completely agree with her. But here, for example, our analysis show that in order to reach the 2050 net zero, half of the technologies that we need to reach those goals are not mature yet. So they are not mature yet. They have to be advanced, made market ready. Therefore, in my view, looking at the challenge we have in terms of the energy and climate, we don't have the much luxury that I don't like this clean technology, but I like other clean technology. I think we need all clean technologies may be different in different countries, depending on the government's position, people's wishes, and others. We need every CO2 emissions reduced in any country, and therefore I agree with the colleagues. And thank you very much to you and Mr. Jobe from Chile, whom I congratulate very much for the recent hydrogen strategy that Chile came up with. Now, the second session was on the energy transition and inclusiveness. And this was chaired by the Canadian Minister O'Regan, and together with the Moroccan Minister Aziz Rabah. So may I now give the floor to Minister O'Regan, please.
Thank you again, Fatih. And thank you to the IEA team. As Christiana Figueres and our group noted, the IEA has been responsible for really talking about green recovery at this pivotal time. And everywhere I look, if I open the Financial Times, it's Fatih Birol talking about green recovery. If I open The Economist, it's Fatih Birol talking about the green recovery. If I open Reader's Digest, it's Fatih Birol talking about the green recovery. It is tremendously heartening and inspiring, I think, for those of us who believe we must combat climate change effectively, who believe that we must do this together as a collective of nations. It is inspiring to see such a diverse and distinguished group of global leaders here, 40 ministers from 5 continents, determined to take action on a sustainable recovery and accelerating clean energy innovation. And I'm even more pleased that we have, as you said, Fatih, over 500,000 people watching us right now, because they will bear witness to our words and they will hold us to account. And that is a very good thing. I co-chaired an extremely productive panel on equitable recovery with my colleague from Morocco, Minister Aziz Rabah. And in spite of the pandemic, our resolve remains unchanged to build a clean energy future with people at the heart of it. If I could sum up what we heard, for our energy transition to be successful, it must be clean, but it also must be affordable. It must deliver reliable energy, and all citizens must see an opportunity to participate and prosper in the future that we are building. Quite simply, we must leave no one behind. During our session, we heard support for gender and racial equality in the energy sector, support for vulnerable people, most especially, and regions. And we heard overwhelmingly consensus that the moment to act to catalyze this clean energy transition is now. We discussed ways to act, including putting equal opportunities for our diverse workforces at the center of recovery policies, investing in clean energy, innovation, and energy efficiency, all of which have high potential to create green jobs and provide opportunities to our workers and our communities. Making smart investments that will allow us to meet our climate targets and mitigate the negative impacts of climate change on the most vulnerable, and focusing on climate financing, which can play a significant role to help us achieve those objectives. I was also pleased with our focus on measuring results, and to that end, Canada's Chief Statistician, Anil Arora, helped share our international community how we can harness data to track our progress on inclusive growth. And on that note, Canada, in collaboration with the IEA, would like to explore the possibility of developing indicators to track progress on inclusive growth. Finally, Ambassador Jane Coombs of New Zealand shared a proverb with us from her homeland. We are all in this canoe together. And indeed, that is how I hope the world will see the task before us. Thank you, Fatih.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for such a precise and insightful summary of your discussions. And you are completely right that tracking the progress is very important. It is what we are going to do in terms of inclusiveness, because, as I said, building back better is good, but building back better altogether is better in my view. So therefore, inclusiveness is a very important part of our agenda, and it is the reason we have brought, we are very happy to have so many different parts of our stakeholders, ministers around the world, 5 continents, the business leaders, thought leaders, civil society, investors, and to have a big group of colleagues and stakeholders coming together was definitely a major success of this summit. Now, third and the last panel was on electricity. Electricity, we all understood how essential the electricity is in our lives, especially in the last few months. And the security of electricity, sustainability of electricity is critical. And to hear the discussion in that meeting, I would like to turn to Madam Commissioner first, followed by the Thai Minister. Madam Commissioner, would you like to start first?
What will I do? Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Birol and IEA for hosting this important event. So regional integration is equally important in the European Union, where the internal market for electricity forms the backbone of secure, affordable and sustainable electricity for European consumers. Later, my co-host, Minister Sondi Chiravong will represent his views of our summary, but the participants acknowledged the importance of low-carbon electricity technologies for the clean energy transition and resource diversification as an important factor for electricity security and clean energy transitions. So investments in diverse portfolios of generation, storage, digitalization and grids are important for future resilience. Participants of our panel also noted that the electricity sector has coped well with the COVID-19 crisis and has shown the resilience of the sector. Lessons can be learned from the responses of the governments, system operators and companies, how to ensure a stable electricity supply throughout the clean energy transition, as well as taking note of innovations so they are brought forward. And participants also acknowledged the key role governments play in fostering healthy investment climates. Also, it was stressed that the importance of enhancing market and regulatory frameworks so that we can take full advantage of economic recovery packages. And according to our participants, particular attention should be given from policymakers to investments that have a long lead time, including transmission and distribution grids, as well as low carbon generation like hydro and nuclear energy, which will have to operate in more flexible manner. And a number of participants also emphasized the transition towards a climate neutral economy. So all sources of low carbon power generation, including renewables, energy efficiency, and other technologies were called to be included in the recovery packages to accelerate the momentum of the clean energy transition. And also, it was noted that IEA has already made an important contribution with a sustainable recovery plan. And we do expect the IEA to continue working on policies needed to ensure a secure and sustainable power mix. With this, I round up the report from the electricity security and sustainability session and give the mic back to you, Dr. Perol.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. May I go back to Thailand, to Bangkok, to Minister Sonticharavong. Mr. Minister, can we hear your perspective as well, sir?
Thank you, Dr. Biro, for giving us all the opportunity to participate in this important event. Thailand sees electricity security and sustainability as key topics for clean energy transitions. In the panel, participants acknowledge the critical role of regional integration as an enabler for renewable integration and secure electricity systems. Thailand, for example, is a leader in the process of power integration at the ASEAN level. And we are proud IEA for the in-depth support you provide to the process, including under our ASEAN chairmanship last year. Participants acknowledge the important role governments play in supporting continued investment in grid infrastructure, as well as ensuring timely market design and establishment of institutions that support regional integration. With well-connected infrastructure, countries can take advantage of diversity across resources and demand patterns to create even more resilient power system. Participants acknowledge that government collaboration and facilitation of technical assistance is key to ensuring the positive developments within regional integration. The IEA is certainly well placed to assist with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. You mentioned the ASEAN. It is, some of us may not well appreciate, but it's a very important region in the world in terms of economy, population, geography. And we are honored that the ASEAN ministers announced the IEA as their strategic partner to develop their energy strategies, including integration of the energy systems there. And I thank you very much for your successful leadership for the last year's ASEAN ministerial meeting, Mr. Minister. Now, we gave a last try to Vice President Timmermans, but it didn't work, unfortunately. And now we are very fortunate to have Mr. Dan Brouillette, Secretary of the United States of Energy. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much, sir. Also, it is early in the morning in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for having time for joining our summit. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Fatih. It's great to see you again. And I'm actually in the middle part of our country. I'm down in Texas, in the southern part of Texas, actually. And I'd like to just reaffirm the great comments of our colleague, our Canadian Minister, His Excellency O'Regan. Fatih, I turned on the TV this morning and the first person I saw was you, talking about the importance of energy and the importance of clean transitions. You are everywhere, my friend, and thank you for your leadership of the IEA. It's great to see you again, even if only virtually. I think that we can all agree that in recent months, we've witnessed devastating developments all throughout the world. We've seen the rise in the spread of COVID-19. We've seen the crushing effect on the well-being of our citizens. We've seen its dramatic impact on the world economy. And we've seen its undeniable mark on the world energy landscape. But we've also seen the world rise to these challenges in very powerful ways, and I'm very thankful for that, and I'm thankful for the leadership of all of the people who are joining us here today. The two reports that inform this conference, I think, point us to yet another great challenge, and it's back to one of the greatest questions of our time. And that question is, how do we produce energy in a way that improves our environment and keeps our economy growing at the same time? And there are two different approaches to this important issue. There's a top-down government-driven approach, and then there's a bottom-up competition-based alternative. And I believe that the bottom-up approach is fully coherent with who we are as democratic societies and nations. And I can affirm that our administration here in the United States clearly adopts this approach, which supports free markets, it funds scientific research, and it honors the choices of producers and consumers alike. Now, in contrast, the top-down approach lets governments do the choosing, which can end up with more taxes, more regulation, perhaps imposing climate risk assessments on companies, so that the government can steer people away from certain energy sources and into the direction of others. Now, those supporting this type of approach often want to go even further by banning any fuel source that produces an emissions. Some would even ban zero emissions nuclear energy, compelling us to rely on renewable energy alone. Now, I think there's an obvious problem with this type of approach. Renewables by themselves cannot ensure the reliable flow of electricity in any nation. Simply stated, every nation can benefit from a wider mix of fuels to keep its grid running. But that's not the only problem with this top-down energy philosophy. As I mentioned earlier, it vetoes the democratic choices of the marketplace. And most of all, I think it neglects the pivotal idea that we've inherited from the Enlightenment. And that's the idea of continued human progress. And it does this by taking a static rather than a dynamic approach to energy, by assuming that what's true today is going to remain true tomorrow. Our experience with the coronavirus alone refutes that assumption altogether. And while we can't predict their exact timing or their nature, we can be sure that other black swans will come. But we can be better prepared. We can embrace policies that support both the environment, and our economy. And in this, Fatih, I fully agree with your call for innovation, especially with clean energy technologies. You know, by any measure, innovation is dynamic and it is not static. But what does that mean? And if an energy source is already clean, it aims to generate more of it. If an energy source isn't as clean, it seeks to make it cleaner and ultimately fully clean. And if an energy source is intermittent, it seeks to make it more reliable. Rather than accepting the status quo, innovation strives to transform it. And to quote from one of your reports, Fatih, innovation is the key to fostering new technologies and advancing existing ones. And as we all know, technology changes everything. That's why here in the United States, my country is abandoning none of our fuels and not one iota of economic opportunity in the quest for a clean energy world. And that's why we're dedicated to an all fuels, all technologies energy strategy. I'm proud of the fact that besides being the world's largest producer of oil, the United States is also the leading natural gas producer, its largest producer of nuclear power, and its second largest generator of wind and solar power, with the highest year-to-year growth in renewables occurring just this past year. In 2019, our wind generation surpassed hydro for the first time, and our renewable consumption surpassed coal for the first time in over 130 years. And that's on top of the fact that today's nuclear energy technology helped us avoid more than 524 million US tons of carbon. And that's the equivalent of removing 100 million cars from the highway. And it's all happening through pro-innovation policies. And yes, that does include robust support for R&D projects, something you mentioned earlier, Fatih. Last year, the United States was the leading R&D spender for clean energy technology, including nuclear, CCUS, renewables, and energy efficiency. And as I speak, our 17 national laboratories at our department are working with many of your countries on the very same projects. But this also includes support for a bottom-up energy philosophy. It's a philosophy which, by regulating less, allows us to innovate even more. And it's a philosophy that we think works in the real world. And that's why I think we lead the world in oil and gas, not only in oil and gas production, but also in reducing energy-related carbon emissions. Fatih, according to your Global Energy Review, these emissions have fallen in the United States by nearly 1 gigaton since 2000, and that's the largest decline by any country over that period. I think as we look into the future, I believe that all of us together, we can achieve the impossible by harnessing the greatest renewable resource of all, our own power to innovate. But first, I think we must reaffirm the values that we all share. And so together, let's reaffirm free markets, and let's reaffirm the freedom of choice. Let's reaffirm our belief in human advancement. Let's be dynamic and not static. And let's move on to a future of clean energy and unmatched opportunity for this generation and for every generation to come. Thank you, Fatih. It's great to be with you again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. First, an apology that when you woke up in the morning, you just saw me. I am sorry, I am not responsible for that, but it is an interesting coincidence. But may I still ask you one question, Mr. Secretary, if we have a minute or so?
Sure.
I mean, in the previous, a few minutes ago, I mentioned, in fact, I complained that while we all talk about the need for clean energy technologies, global R&D expenditures from governments for clean energy research and development, stable. Last 10 years, stable, didn't change much. We talk much, but we don't pay much for the R&D globally for clean energy. This is data, nobody can dispute. And when we look at the countries, and you are right completely, Mr. Secretary, US is the leader since many years in terms of the R&D in clean energy, looking at all the clean energy sources, including renewables, grids, CCUS, and others. Now, there are many clean energy technologies, of course, but I am sure you and your department focuses on a few of them, giving them a priority in terms of the budget allocation, in terms of staff resources, in terms of the intellectual leadership. From your point of view, Mr. Secretary, what are the one or two major emphasis that your department is giving in terms of the R&D clean energy technologies, sir?
Thank you, Fatih. I appreciate the opportunity to answer that question. You know, you're right about world budgets. They have been, static. You're absolutely correct about the data. Here in the United States, it's been somewhat flat as well. When we look at the U.S. Department of Energy, one of my focal points here will be nuclear energy and nuclear technologies, especially advanced nuclear technologies. We will spend an enormous amount of time and money over the course of the next few years trying to develop new reactors, new fuels for these reactors that are accident tolerant. They are walk-away safe. They are non-proliferant, meaning it is impossible to develop a warhead from the use of this type of fuel. We do see this as the future because of the qualities of nuclear energy. It's very dense, it's very clean, emissions-free, as I mentioned earlier. So we're going to spend a lot of time and effort there trying to develop these smaller reactors. We've announced a $150 million project last year to develop high-assay LEU fuels, which will power these reactors. We're going to do that at our Idaho. We're going to do the fuel development in Portsmouth, Ohio, but our national laboratory in Idaho will lead the effort, Idaho National Laboratory, which is out in the western part of the United States. We're also going to focus on wind technologies and on solar technologies. It will be a priority for our department, and a large portion of our R&D budget will be spent at our National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. We're going to be looking at the next generation of solar power, perovskites and other materials that might be used to make solar panels even more efficient. And we hope by doing so, they will also make them much more affordable. And the other big point in that related to renewable energy is going to be the development of newer battery technologies, which we're pursuing very, very aggressively. So those will be the focal points for our R&D efforts here in our department in the United States.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Thank you very much for your leadership in the R&D clean energy budget and innovation. Of course, in the United States, like in Europe, about 20% of the zero emission electricity comes from nuclear power. And in addition to the new nuclear technologies, lifetime extensions of the existing nuclear plants is critical in order to see a decline in the emissions. Of course, it is up to the countries, up to the governments, which technologies they are going to decide, they are going to go for. We have many options, but in my view, we don't have the option to exclude from that country, that technology, from this country, this technology. Important thing is to make sure that the global emissions do not rebound and they decline in a secure, sustainable way. This is the way that we see it. So, dear ministers, dear colleagues, we are at the end of our some 3 hours of a summit. I want to take your 1 minute to say a few concluding remarks. First of all, this was from our point of view, from our modest agency point of view, it was a historical summit, bringing more than 40 ministers from 5 continents, which make more than 80% of the global energy use, more than 80% of the global economy. And as I said, which is very good for us, through our social channels, over 500,000 people have followed this debate, and there is a huge impression around the world, and we are very, very happy with that. Of course, this brings us new responsibilities. Couple of things. What is next? What is next is the real world implementation. And IEA is very keen to continue to lead globally the real world implementation to have better lives for our people, and to make sure that the global economy recovers and recovers in a sustainable way. We are going to track the developments in line with our sustainable recovery plan. And many governments mentioned, thank you very much to all of them, our Clean Energy Transitions Program, which works with many emerging countries in order to accelerate the clean energy transition in a sustainable and resilient way. So we will support the many countries talk today, their leadership in terms of the G7, G20, and COP presidencies, and we would like to take advantage of all of these opportunities. And taking all of these IEAs, as many ministers mentioned, very boldly, I would say, IEA's ever-growing global convening power, we are going to have next summer another Clean Energy Transition Summit, and we hope to see you, all of you, once again there. So when the people ask me, what this summit bring to you or give to you, I'm sure I will get this question as soon as I leave this room. What I see in one word, momentum. A momentum behind the sustainable recovery, a momentum behind the clean energy transitions. And I'm very happy, I'm very thankful to all the ministers, business leaders, thought leaders, civil society participants. We are going to put a short summary of this discussion in a few hours, but we are thankful to you, and I am so encouraged and heartened to see so many ministers just spending 3 hours with us and paying such attention to clean energy transitions and that of the work of International Energy Agency. On behalf of my colleagues, I thank all of you from the bottom of my heart from IEA's Paris headquarters. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.